welcome to I-24 News Defense, a weekly review of strategic affairs, security, intelligence, and more in cooperation with Israel Defense Magazine. On this edition, a focus on the rapid-fire spread of the Islamic State and first-hand impressions of the journalists risking their lives to cover exactly these kinds of stories. First, in recent weeks, the reign of terror of IS has swiftly become common knowledge, with horrific tactics expertly captured on camera for all to see and fear. Its members use every possible means to spread terror, including an ancient form of execution, beheading. The Iran Masli has more, and before we warn, some viewers may find these images disturbing.
American citizen Obama, depends on your next decision.
Beheading, one of the cruelest methods for executions, has been around for centuries. In the era before firearms, it was regarded cheaper and even humane relative to crucifixion or boarding at the stake. In ancient Persia and during the Roman Empire, public beheadings were held using a machine similar to the guillotine for foreign enemies, traitors, and even common thieves in public places. In medieval England, decapitated heads were hung on stakes along the walls of the London Tower. The guillotine was introduced to the world during the French Revolution, used in the ceremonial beheadings of royalty. Since 2005, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Iran, Iraq, and Qatar enabling beheadings based on Islamic laws. But this legal revival is not at the core of the Islamic State militia's choice to behead its captives. The extremists who conquered large parts of Syria and Iraq used it to tremble and horrify enemies, making a name for them and promoting their cause towards a united Islamic State. Unlike past methods of beheading, those were efficient, quick, and relatively painless, and therefore using guillotine or an axe blow, Islamic State uses throat cutting by knife, causing great suffering to the victims. Among the victims, Shia Muslims and Syrian and Iraqi soldiers, but their brutality became global when they beheaded American journalists James Foley and Steven Sotloff.
Like people around the world, Americans are repulsed by their barbarism. We will not be intimidated. Their horrific acts only unite us as a country and stiffen our resolve to take the fight against these terrorists.
The web is full of clips that create a picture of force that can't be stopped. Their message, join us while you can, or our knife will reach you too.
Joining me now is Dr. Eli Carmon, Senior Researcher at the Institute for Counterterrorism at the IDC. Dr. Carmon, thanks very much for being with me. I want to start with something the former head of IDF intelligence said, Major General Amos Yadlin. He said in an op-ed that IS militants aren't a major threat to Israel, that the global panic is overrated. Do you agree?
It's overrated. I think for the moment they are successful in the Iraqi and the Syrian front, but as compared adversary for Israel, I think they don't represent a match. And in my opinion, in the end, the United States and some coalition forces will destroy their military strength, but they will remain entrenched as terrorists in the big cities in Iraq and possibly also in Syria.
Dr. Carmon, we just saw in the previous report the exceedingly brutal and seemingly very primitive tactics that IS uses, but at the same time you have these well-edited videos. They seem to be very advanced on social media. Is IS, in fact, an advanced group?
We must remember that the guy that formed practically the ISIS in 2003-2004, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, used the same methods, and he was the first which beheaded American hostage. But what we see today is magnitude of these massacres is incomparable with what we saw in the past. So they try to use terror directly on the field, but also through the social media in order to influence their adversaries, and we saw that they succeeded in at least dismantling the Iraqi army, which were fighting them in Mosul.
So, Dr. Carmon, you mentioned the Iraqi army, but the Islamic State has been likened to a spreading cancer, spreading to several different countries. Of course, we know it has a presence in Syria. Apart from Syria, where is ISIS? Where does the IS exist?
there is a difference between Iraq and Syria, because in Iraq they are at the moment allied with some of the Sunni tribes and with the Ba'athists, the Naqshbandi army, and for this reason they are more successful. In Syria they are based mainly on foreign fighters, some of them Syrians, but a lot of foreign fighters, and they have to fight not only against the regime but also against the coalition or the opposition groups like Jabhat al-Nusra, the Free Syrian Army, and so on. But I think the fact that they have now huge financial resources, the oil, the money that they succeeded to grab in Mosul, all this gives them advantage on the other groups. The moment the military strength will be destroyed, the moment they won't control a huge territory, I think that foreign fighters will prefer other groups.
I want to ask you then about foreign fighters in particular. This is one of the things that's really made IS stand out, managing to recruit thousands of Europeans. What is Europe doing wrong in terms of this? What should Europe be doing, perhaps, to stop this recruitment?
This is a phenomenon which began only in 2011, and we must say again that most of the people that went to fight in Syria. At the beginning, they were members of some small groups or the Free Syrian Army. Then they joined later in 2012 Jabhat al-Nusra, and only in 2013 we saw that many of them joined the Islamic ISIS. By the way, their leader in Syria is a Chechen. So they are based in Syria on foreign fighters, and this is indeed a threat that these people return to Europe, to Australia, to the United States. We saw this kind of phenomenon after the wars in Afghanistan, in Chechnya, in Bosnia, but now they are great numbers. Some of them are also converts, and I think the European countries have to unite to fight together, because for the moment there is no real European policy in order to challenge this kind of threat.
Yes, I believe it's over 3,000 foreign fighters just since 2011. Dr. Eli Carmon, thanks very much for joining us. As the fate of James Foley and Stephen Sokoloff has made abundantly clear, for journalists, one of the toughest and most dangerous challenges is covering conflict. These are reporters often daring to go where the press is not free and the truth is hard to come by. I-24 News correspondent Shahar Peled brings us a closer look at the people risking their lives to bring us information.
They go to the most dangerous places in the world, willingly risking their lives to get the truth from the darkest regions of conflict.
I'm always afraid when I'm in a war zone. I have been covering Somalia, the Kosovo War, the Balkans. I mean, I was in Libya. I mean, in very difficult environment. When you are in these kind of places, you have to to be afraid, because it helps you to understand what's going on.
Italian journalist Maurizio Molinari has been entering and leaving Gaza for the past 6 months, especially increasing his visits in the last weeks of ongoing clashes between Israel and Hamas. A father of 4, he tries not to take any unnecessary risks.
When I heard the Palestinian firing with shotguns, I left. That was the threshold.
But in recent years, the man with a camera has become a target himself. Some 30 Western reporters and over 200 local ones have been killed in Syria alone since the fighting began in the embattled country.
Things are much more dangerous than the way it used to be. Once you get into a war zone, you have to be careful of grenades, of bullets, and explosion. Now you are being targeted because you're a journalist.
Whoever carries a camera, in fact, carries a dangerous weapon against the regime. Assad isn't afraid of those carrying guns, but he's scared of the camera.
Many other reporters have been kidnapped without a trace. From within the Gaza conflict, several foreign journalists admitted to feeling threatened, revealing what they had seen only after leaving the battered enclave. But Molinari's experience was different, as he says it seemed that no Hamas member was seen on the surface to even pose a threat.
After the operation started, they completely disappeared. My experience, if I have to say the truth, was completely the opposite. We were surrounded by civilians, pro and against Hamas, or apparently civilians. But Hamas people as themselves, the only way to meet them was to go to the Shifa hospital, where they have their headquarters.
According to Engel, becoming a war correspondent is not an act of bravery, but a simple yearning to tell a true story, especially while visiting dark and hostile environments.
beginning with Gaza and Lebanon and Syria and Iraq and Pakistan and Afghanistan, Kosovo, Rwanda, Congo, each one of these places I was scared. And you know, at least in 5 of these places, you know, I decided that if I'm gonna make it alive, I would never go back again to a war zone.
But the need to go back and tell the story is stronger.
Real journalism, the way I see it, of going out there in the field became so rare. So, you know, the people who are making it seen as, wow, absolute crazy, absolute lunatics, you know, into suicides or so. It's not I'm crazy of doing it. I think that I'm one of the last normal journalists around, you know, because this is the idea of the job.
And this week, a seminar sponsored by the IDC Herzliya is being held in Israel on exactly this issue of covering conflict. Joining me now from there is Evangeline O'Regan, a Spanish journalist who covers security, military, and defense for a range of publications. Evangeline, thanks very much for being with us. First of all, tell me about the conference. Who's involved? What's the aim?
The MICE conference, MICE stands for Media and Conflict Seminar, is a seminar organized by the students of the IDC Center in Herzliya. And they've put together for the last few years a course to bring in journalists from abroad, journalists that are interested in pursuing a career in reporting conflict in the future. Some of us are working, some of them are just finishing their studies at university. And the aim is to put together Israeli journalists with international journalists, have a few days to spend together and just listen to what they have to say, have a taste and also to look to ask questions about the conflict firsthand. A lot of us have never been here covering the conflict, so I think it's the first opportunity to really get to know what's going on firsthand.
This particular conflict plays out almost as much in the media as it does on the ground. How would you describe the perspective from Spain?
There was a lot of media attention, and also this conflict, this time the operation in the Gaza Strip has coincided with the rise of ISIS and other Islamic terror groups. So I think people were very interested in see the connection maybe with Hamas and other Islamic terror groups. So people are. There's a fear in the West about the rise, and I think this is where Hamas comes, the rise of Islamic groups, terror groups, and this is where Hamas comes into the picture for us in the West.
Netanyahu has frequently made that comparison between Hamas and the Islamic State. Do you think it's justified?
Well, there's a common background in the ideology. All of the different Al-Qaeda, Islamic terrorist group have all different edges to it. We're looking at Boko Haram. They have a national agenda in Nigeria. We're looking also at AGMI in all the Sahel region, in the Sahara Desert in Africa. They have a local region, in my opinion, and we can see it not from their speeches. They have also a global agenda.
Has your perspective of this particular conflict changed with your visit to Israel so far?
Well, obviously you get more insight when you're sitting down with somebody and you're talking to them, you're sharing a cup of coffee. It's so hard for journalists to come and experience the news on the ground. So I think this has given us an opportunity, and reporting will be fairer in the future.
Evangeline, as a military reporter, how did you see this last operation in Gaza?
Well, from a military point of view, and when I say I cover military, I guess because people are involved in military operations, so you always tend to see a reporter not only give the analysis from a military point of view. I think from that point of view, the Iron Dome was the difference in this operation, and we've seen the success that has been for the nation of Israel. But also, there's a big part of this story is the humanitarian side of things in Israel, of course, but especially in Gaza, where the number of victims has been so high, and that's also, from a military and from a human point of view, is of great concern.
Stories emerging from Gaza after this particular operation have revealed restrictions put on journalists. Have you encountered this kind of intimidation before while covering conflict zones?
No, I haven't. I know when you're dealing with terrorist groups, there are all sorts of restrictions. Today we witnessed the beheading of another journalist, another colleague by the ISIS group. We're facing enormous danger when reporting about terrorist activity. We've seen it from my homeland in Spain. We've seen what terrorist group ETA, the ETA, has done to many journalists. It's not, I mean, we're not dealing with Democrats, are we? So it's always hard.
Evangeline O'Regan, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
And that wraps up this edition of I-24 News Defense. Be sure to catch us here in the Jaffa Port next week. And in the meantime, for all the latest headlines and analysis from around the world, find us online at i24news.tv.